Welcome to Retirementals, a podcast that dives headfirst into the issues facing the financial sector at the intersection of investment, technology and financial advice. Hosted by Abraham Oksanya, you can expect raw honesty, critical analysis and energetic interviews. Here is your host, Abraham Oksanya.
Hello and welcome to Retirementals. It's great to have you all on the show today. I am really excited about our guest today. Dr. Sarah Newcomb is the Director of Behavioral Science at Morningstar and the author of Loaded, Money, Psychology, and How to Get Ahead Without Leaving Your Value Behind. Dr. Newcomb, welcome to Retirementals.
Thank you. It's great to be here.
Can I just start by saying, wow? I say that because I was planning to give personal finance book a miss this year. I go through a lot of them, and so this year I decided that I wasn't going to read any personal finance book, and I picked up your book. And I could not put it down. You know, for somebody who had a degree, what we would call a first-class degree in mathematics, you have a way with words. Just incredibly powerful book.
Well, thank you. It was a labor of love for sure. And I think of the book as it's a collection of all of my aha moments over the course of about 10 years of studying money from many different angles, but looking into the ways, the interplay between our minds and our money. And that means culture and the stories that we internalize and the messages and everything. I mean, money affects our hopes and dreams. It affects our quality of life. And yet we are often, so many of us are introduced to it as a necessary evil with corrupting force. And yeah, so it's no wonder that we all are a little bit mixed up and complex when it comes to money. So then you start teaching financial concepts to people whose brains are loaded down with baggage around money, and it's no wonder the concepts don't get just quickly absorbed and used because there's too much other stuff in the way.
So let's unpack some of that, and I want you to take us right back. You know, one of the things that got me hooked on your book is that you talked about your own upbringing and how that led to what you referred to as anti-wealth culture. Take us right back. Take us back to, your growing up. What was that like for you and the journey that led you to where you are today?
Yeah, well, so I grew up in a lower income family. Both of my parents worked jobs, not really careers, so they weren't going out and fulfilling their life's purpose. They were putting food on the table for 4 kids. And we never went wanting, let's put it this way. We never went without our basic needs met, but I was well aware as a young child of the things we didn't have that the people around me had. Because socially, we are socioeconomic creatures from a young age because our economy affects us even when we're kids.
Right.
Kids judge each other for the stuff their parents are able to buy them. It's these things we start young. It's cultural. So this is, not understanding at the time. Hindsight helped me see a lot of this more clearly. But what was going on with me, I think, was growing up with a sense of lack. It affected how I felt what I felt my options were in life, my career track options. What we are exposed to, we do it largely inherit. At some point as adults, we have to start to question the things that we internalized as kids. But the messages that I internalized as a kid were very, as you said, anti-wealth. And I think that there's a lot to be said here. We know that inequality exists. We see it. Numbers are very clear on that. And that's a hard reality for people to understand. It's easy for us as humans to take sides. So some of us view the world in terms of haves and have-nots. And my parents and a lot of the people in the culture that I grew up in were very much would demonize the haves. I think whichever side you're on, we see this all through psychology. It's a defense mechanism. In order to feel good about our in group, we then find fault with the other
group.
And it's a very common, it relieves psychological pain. It's very common. Our brains do it almost, or if not automatically. But if we want to be conscious decision makers who are making smart decisions, then we have to recognize when when these habits of mind are just lazy habits of mind. What I see when I say an anti-wealth mindset, what I'm talking about is a stereotype, a cultural stereotype that a lot of people learn that glorifies poverty and at the same time demonizes wealth. And we see these stereotypes, these cultural characters all through our stories and movies and songs, and they're everywhere. So, I mean, we have Mr. Scrooge, Ebenezer Scrooge, right, is the same character as Mr. Krabs in SpongeBob. You know, that's the same as King Midas. He's the cautionary tale of the miser who cares for money, of material wealth above the wealth of the human spirit. And those stories are great and they teach deep truths, but they also paint the wealthy in a caricature that is just as dangerous as any other caricature. And I think we have a narrative that runs through our culture of haves and have-nots, and we pit ourselves against one another when we think in that binary way. What money makes, the presence of money in your life, having lots of resources, means you have a whole lot more options, opportunity, freedom. When I wrote the book Loaded, the editor kept telling me I couldn't use the word class. I had to find some other way of talking about class without using the word class, because it's such a hot button word that I thought, can you at least acknowledge the irony of the fact that this is a book about the psychology of money and you don't want me to use the word class? Can you understand how hard it is for us to talk about money and wealth inequality and income inequality and all the things about, money represents the opportunities we have to live a fulfilling human life, and the opportunities are not equally dispersed. And so it's really, really easy to get mad at money, but it's not money's fault. Money is this inanimate thing. Money is a social contract. Money is actually really efficient because we don't have to go and barter for exactly the thing we need from a person who needs exactly the thing we have. Like the idea is actually very functional, but we have made it so dysfunctional because we're humans. That's what we do.
And I think that is a powerful story. I can actually relate with a lot of these things that you said. One of the things, that just as I picked up your book and I started reading, is it made me go back to my own upbringing and the incredible amount of lack. I grew up in an environment with that there was not a lot of money. As a matter of fact, most people in this country would describe that as poverty, but these negative messages that you talked about were wrapped, they were all around me. Money is the root of evil, which is a misquote of the Bible, right? Of a verse of the Bible. Money says love of money, but people say money is the root of evil. Money makes the world go around. There's all these. So you talked in the book about all these subtle messages around us, that in as much as we say money is the biggest taboo and people don't talk about it directly, there are so much embedded in our everyday life. There's so much messaging about money, and that finds its way into us and how we behave,
how we organize the world in our own minds. Our understanding of the world, there are money messages woven all through it. And so those messages, if you leave them unexamined, they're going to affect the way you handle your money. So it's just like anything else, as you grow into adulthood and you start to create the value system that you want to live by, that needs to include some thought about how you want to handle your resources.
Incredibly powerful stuff. So the message I am taking from here is that, there are extremes of these things, and your book is essentially about how we develop a good, healthy relationship about money. And you talked about, you set out two strategies for how we can challenge our core beliefs about money. Let's talk a little bit about those strategies.
Yeah, I think the reason why it's worth doing some of this deep thinking about how your views on money may have been shaped is because we're all walking around with views about money in our head, all of us. Some are true, some are not. Some are useful, some are not. And if some are getting in your way, then it's good to be able to rewrite them. So taking stock of the messages that you've internalized, it sounds big and heady. Really, all you have to do is write a little like journal entry on what was money like growing up for you. Like if money was a character in your life story, is it one of the main characters? Is it a hero or a villain character? If you don't focus on how to manage your money, if you just say that it's not important, so then you don't learn it. Now there is this really important life skill of resource management that you've opted out of. You've just decided that because you've got hangups about money in the financial world and inequality, et cetera, because money makes you mad, because you don't like it, because it's irritating and confusing and sometimes feels really unfair, or that it exacerbates unfairness, you say, well, I'm not going to learn about it. Great. Well, it's going to control your life, because if you don't learn about it, you will fall into a poverty trap, almost for sure. Poverty traps are not for stupid people. Poverty traps are like just real things that you fall into, and you have to be careful to stay out of poverty trap. That's the purpose of money in our lives, is so that we can use it to support our dreams and goals. So if you demonize it and distance yourself from it, you never learn the basics, and you end up a slave to it, because then you are at just a job that is soulless and drains you, and there you start on the downward spiral toward
You also talk about the opposite side of that in the book, though, about how people who actually have wealth or privilege, if people who have, however way you want to frame it, that whilst the view of this view that we have, that riches, the rich are nasty or bad is not justified. You made the point in the book about why growing up with wealth or privilege doesn't necessarily mean that people end up forming a better relationship with money than growing up with poverty.
Right. I mean, it's just as easy to see there are just as many mistakes, and people with money use money in relationships for power. In relationships, money is like it's a tool in social interactions, and so it's just as easy for wealthy children to grow up inheriting unhealthy financial attitudes as well, because they're watching human people make decisions with money too. And that's all it is. We're watching each other make decisions with money. And because we talk about money so indirectly, and we don't just sit down and deal with it and talk about it, parents are so clammed up talking to their kids about money. And we don't teach financial education in any like real life skills kind of way. The topic is left, people are left to just sort of learn about money on their own. And so that's true for the wealthy as well.
Now, a word from our sponsor. Nikki Heaton-Jones is the Managing Director and the Chief Investment Officer at Betafolio, the high-tech, low-cost, discretionary model portfolio manager. Nikki, can you tell us a little bit about why Betafolio is different than other model portfolio solutions out there on the market?
Well, I think as a startup, we're very lucky because we've had a blank sheet of paper and we're starting from scratch. So we've got no legacies to deal with. The key difference with us is that we really aim to partner with advisors with the end client's outcomes as the core goal for all of us. And we want to provide everything that the advisor needs to run their investment proposition. So we give them regulatory support, we can help with platform due diligence, as well as fund due diligence and the usual investment pieces. We've got our sister company, Timeline, which allows us to really support advisors with their retirement planning, and we can produce CRPs. For example, I'm working with a client at the moment to bespoke a decumulation strategy for them and work a way of managing that within our discretionary service for them. So we can touch on every element connected to investment that the advisor needs. We have a really different approach to rebalancing from many of the model portfolio services out there. We're supporting our clients to move away from calendar-based rebalancing. We've done a lot of research into tolerance-based rebalancing, which we know provides superior returns, but we're actually developing the processes to enable that to happen. And make it easier for advisors, actually. Another key part of our full service is the client communications that we provide. So advisors will have a bank of sales aids, thought pieces, regular commentary, as well as the usual quarterly reports and performance reports that you would expect an MPS to provide. So I think that, to sum it up, the difference is that we're designing something that meets every need that an advisor may have for offering an investment proposition to retail clients.
Thank you very much, Nikki. When a lower or middle income family comes into wealth, I like this. They are like immigrants arriving in new land. They are there is a new culture to navigate with, new rules to learn, and even a new form of language. And I think a lot, about this myself, as an immigrant, and I know that a lot of financial advisors work with clients who maybe themselves, their parents weren't wealthy and they're first generation wealthy, and this challenge about how you start to train the next generation so that they can manage the wealth that is being handed over to them, so that we don't end up with this cycle of wealth doesn't last beyond 3 generation thing. So in the book, you talked about the avoiders, the assimilators, and the integrators. Talk a little bit about that and what the best sort of approach or the right attitude to managing this is.
Yeah, so that is a great bit of work that comes from Jim Grubman. So if you liked that bit, you would love his book, Strangers in Paradise. Jim Grubman was the professor who got me into this line of research back when I was trying to sort out my own financial psychology and learn how to manage money. But he has worked with families planning intergenerational wealth transfers for a long time. And he works more as a family therapist that also understands asset management. Right. That's more his way. And the thing that he has found is that the families who, coming into wealth, and let's just define wealth as more money than you've ever had to handle.
More money than the previous generation.
or more money that for you, wealth for you is just more money than you've ever had to handle.
Right.
Or that you've ever thought about having, right? So now you're wealthy, you have this money, and it's not as if we just inherit or absorb or learn money management, out of thin air. But when you suddenly have a lot more resources, a lot more means, there are things that change, like in many cases, social things change. And even the way that people, you move to a different neighborhood because you want a better school system, or because you can live in your dream house out in the country and raise horses or whatever. Now you've moved, now you're going to have a different social group. And the social aspect of having wealth comes with a whole new rule set, and so you have the people who, just like when immigrants come from one country to a new country, there tend to be three, this is what Dr. Grubman found, there tend to be three responses to that culture shock. One response is to completely assimilate. Those are the people that are like full on blue jeans, I'm all America. I'm going to be more American than the Americans if they're, if they're coming to America. Or, someone who comes to Britain and they're like all about Britain, right? That's assimilation. I'm just going to be the new culture, leave the old one behind. The other one is, the other extreme is holding on to the old and not adopting any of the new, because you want to protect the values that allowed you to do the things to get there in the first place, right? You want to protect the cultural values. And so that is, the other extreme is not assimilating at all. But then the healthy one is integration. And integration is where you take the parts of the new culture that you admire and that align with your values, and you bring with you the things that you want to keep, and you merge those things together. That's the healthy, assimilated, new situation. But just like anything, I mean, we need examples. We need examples of people who cross cultures, but the only examples that we have are in our stories and movies, and we're back to stereotypes.
And those examples aren't, they're not reflective of where we want to be. They're not reflective of, this positive, empowering attitude to money. The other thing that struck me about your book is this idea about psychological distance, and how we can use this to to shape our behavior and our relationship with money. So I want to talk a little bit about this. You talked about some experiment in the book. I'm not going to try to rehash that, but where they asked people to essentially describe the future in some shape or form. And what I was expecting as I was reading this is that people who get really vivid about the future, and they can they know where they're going to be in 10 years time, and what kind of houses they want to live in, what retirement is going to look like. I assumed that those people are going to be better long-term managers of money, or better long-term investor. But that's not the case, necessarily, because it seems that it depends on the kind of person that you are naturally. If you
with psychological distance, I mean, you've pegged it correctly. Like the further that you think into the future, the clearer you can see that future, the better you're going to be able to handle long-term investments. Most of us tend to think, like when I've surveyed people about how far into the future they tend to think and plan, it's generally like 70% of people think less than 10 years ahead. And
Right.
that makes sense. I mean, but the thing is that to manage your money well, you have to think more than 10 years ahead. And so people who are naturally prone to thinking ahead are going to, sort of by default, be the people who are already thinking about long-term planning. They're more patient. If you have a short-term mindset, that works against you financially because of all sorts of reasons. I think where the putting something into the future is dangerous to our finances is when if the future feels far off to you.
Mm.
If you think about, if I were to say in 20 years, like how far away is 20 years in your mind's eye? Is it here or is it way over there? How clear is it? Can you totally see that? Or is it like, yeah, whatever that, the clarity and detail with which we see something helps us to attach to it and make it happen. So we are more likely to reach goals that are clear in our minds. We're more likely to uh, prioritize the future over the present, to save. So short-term thinkers have a harder time saving. And it's because the psychological distance we have to cross, it's like the physics in our brain. Psychological distance is pretty much the physics of the brain, because the way that we picture time and space affects how we weigh trade-offs in our mind. So when in behavioral science, we talk about rational versus irrational behavior. But really what's irrational is kind of defined as when your trade-off decisions don't line up. But think about, if I were to say to you, think about the difference in time from today and 1 month from now. How big does that feel in your mind's eye, right? Now think about 10 years from now and 10 years plus 1 month from now. Like that is smaller in your mind's eye. And because we put it off there, the trade-offs that we don't make our financial trade-offs on paper. We make them in our minds. We set up scenarios. If I do this with my money, this happens. If I do that with my money, this happens. And then we do a little cost benefit analysis, right? Which one do I want more? Which one? And then we do the thing that feels best. That's what our brains do in an instant. Cost benefit analysis. So if there are things about the way that we think that skew that mental cost benefit analysis, then we can understand why we start to make these wrong-headed decisions. So why do so many of us prefer a lump sum of money right now versus twice as much in the future? Well, because the future is far off and abstract and vague, and who knows if we'll get there. But the upfront, the right now is right here. I can see it, I can feel it, and I'm viscerally attached to it. And so we overweight the present because it feels more concrete, it feels more real, more safe, all those things. But we end up underweighting the things that are over here that are more abstract. And if it would be fine if we could sort of take this, put it up here and say, okay, now let me make this trade-off here. What's the real trade-off? But we don't do that. We skip that step. And because we skip that step, the thing that's far off in the future stays vague, stays like not awesome enough to prioritize until it's so close and looming. And this is why when you talk to a 25-year-old, they cannot get their head around retirement.
Right.
But then they show up at 55 with $100,000 and they want to retire in 10 years. And you're like, I don't know if we can do that, like you didn't care enough when you needed to care. The reason is psychological distance, because when things are set off far in our mind's eye, we discount them. And the more impatient you are, the steeper your discount rate. So I'm a short-term thinker, an impatient person. That means that waiting for anything is really hard for me. I pay a high cost of waiting. Somebody who's patient they just literally don't pay that cost. It doesn't hurt them to wait. So this is why the people who are great investors also happen to be long-term thinkers and patient people. So if you want to become a good long-term investment, but you're not a long-term thinker and you're not a patient person, it doesn't mean you can't invest. It means you need to know yourself well enough to like train your mind to think longer term, work on your patience. Otherwise you won't stay in a long-term investment because you're too short-term mindset.
And I think there is something incredibly powerful about what you just said. So I guess the question is, as a financial advisor, or just as an investor, is there a way for me to know what my natural tendency is? There a test?
Yeah. So yeah, I love that question. There's probably a test somewhere, an academic kind of test. But what I would say, if you wanted to, so there's one thing that I remember, one paper that was done where to look at the way the time frame in people's heads.
Right.
And the way that they had set up this experiment was that half the people were like drug addicted and had very, very short time horizons. And the other half were not. They were long, they did not have addiction. Because this paper was linking short-termism with addiction and drug use.
Right.
So short-term thinking is a danger, not just for your finances, for all aspects of life. Like we've got to think longer term. But the way they set this up is they had their addicts group and non-addicts group, and they had them write stories about, make up a story about Joe. Just write a story about Joe, what happened in Joe's day. And then they had people read the stories and code them for how much time the stories took up,
Right.
So how far were they thinking in their imagination? And the people that were actively addicted drug users, their stories were like 1 day long.
Right.
And the other stories were like 3 weeks.
Right.
And so you could just see into the imagination of a short-term thinker versus a longer-term thinker, So I thought that was one interesting way. So how would you apply that in financial planning? I mean, if you just ask a client to tell you about their plans for their future and their money, see how far out they go. I mean,
right.
At what point does it just dissolve into, and then I don't know, I'm sitting around, because that's when they've stopped thinking about it. And so maybe it's, you can kind of get a sense of how detailed, how clear, how long are they thinking, how detailed are they thinking, how clear is their thinking, and just help them work on that little by little. If they can only see a few months ahead, you don't need to push them 40 years, get them to see 6 months ahead, maybe. If they really need to, if they see the long-term plan, but then start to see the steps that you take to get toward the long-term plan. I think that, if there's anything I've seen in my research that I'm convinced is a real signal, it is that the way that we think about time, it really, really affects the timeline of money management.
And I wonder if we can use that to influence not just how much risk people take in their portfolio, should it, is the first question, or whether we use that as a way to decide or determine how much hand-holding someone might need, especially in choppy markets. What's your thoughts on that?
Yeah, well, so understanding a person's mental time horizon is what I call it. The longer the mental time horizon, the more they should probably be able to ride storms, because
Right.
they're thinking long term. So short-term thinkers are going to need more hand holding. I think it's good to just know that up front. But so in what ways? So short-term thinkers are going to tend to be more risk seeking, because you need the immediate reward. I mean, if you have to put your money away, you're not going to use it for 10 years. That's no fun. You don't get to have any fun for 10 years, So so finding ways to create milestones, and like even things like you know, I don't want to say celebrating, but like tracking and you know, of making contributions. You know, when short-term thinkers have, you know, like they need to like, yay, you contributed. You did
Right.
you, because short-term thinking and saving don't tend to go together. So as an advisor, you know, if you find someone who's got a short-term mindset, you're going to want to train that mindset over time to think further ahead. But it's not like you can just, you know, you also need, just like we're like puppies. Those of us with short-term mindsets, we need treats. Like, you know what I mean? Like, you just give those like close milestones, because then the habit of saving gets rewarded. It gets and it changes your mindset about saving. Is no longer, oh, it's drudgery. It's like, no, it feels good to save. I like seeing my account go up. I like that feeling of knowing that I'm going to be prepared, you know. But you have to like draw attention to those positive things that happen in the immediate, because the long-term payoff isn't for a long time, and that's way out in your mind's eye, and it's over there. Like, you just don't feel that. You got to bring some of the reward up close, in order to make saving worthwhile for a short-term thinker. But when it comes to money management and retirement planning, it seems that we don't naturally care early enough to plan.
Right.
And so one of the, you know, to avoid having the next generation come to you at 55 with no assets and say, I want to retire, you know, we need to be, I think we have got to be better talking about money, talking about the messy parts of money, and meaning the parts that make us uncomfortable about our financial systems, because those are important conversations that we have to have as a society and as cultures. They're important, but those are big, huge issues that we created as a society and that we have to fix as a society. And those take a long time to talk about through and fix, and, you know, but then in the meantime, in your own life, you've got to be able to talk to yourself with clear eyes about money. Where are your hangups? What are the things that, you know, where are the areas in your financial life that maybe, when was the last time you kicked yourself for spending? Or, you know, what do you feel like you could be doing better? How could you be managing your resources in a way that's like supporting your dreams even more?
Incredible stuff, powerful stuff. Dr. Newcomb, thank you very much for your time, for your wisdom. I am very, very grateful for that. I'll be remiss if I don't thank my incredible team who worked very hard to put this program together, led by my producer, Hannah Dickinson. Thank you very much, guys. I'd like to thank our sponsors, Timeline app, the retirement planning software, and Batefolio, the high-tech, low-cost flat fee model portfolio manager. And to you, our listeners, thank you for your time. I hope you've had as much fun listening to the program as we have making it. You can find more about the show at retirementals.co.uk, and you can follow me on Twitter. My handle is Abraham on Money. Until next time, thank you and goodbye.